Good evening. I'm Reverend Evelyn Barnes from Star of Hope Baptist Church, and welcome to our February edition of Hope Talks. This is our opportunity to share together, to get connected as we connect to God, to one another, and to the hot topics of the day. Those topics that are of interest to our church members and those around. So we welcome you all to this session. We're not going to belabor the beginning because we have lots of good questions that we want to share. So let's open with prayer. Father God, we come to you right now in the name of Jesus Christ, thanking you and praising you for another opportunity to share. We thank you for those who you've sent our way, and thank you already for the information I'm sure that will help us to grow and to be informed and to make wise decisions. Now, God, we pray that you bless us through this time. In the name of Jesus, amen. Well, as everybody who is used to our platform knows that we have an expert every on every show and a facilitator. Our expert today and facilitator are actually connected. We have Dr. Erica Locke, who is a Philly native, and she, in her own words, a California transplant. She's a board certified doctor in emergency medicine and family medicine, and she completed her training at Christiana Care's Innovative EM/FM residency. Dr. Locke currently practices emergency medicine at Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital in Monterey, California, and family medicine at the VA Palo Alto Medical Center, Monterey office. She has a passion for working with undeserved populations and is honored to serve our military veterans, migrant workers, and the diverse population in Monterey. She is a well-versed individual who has many passions and evidently many gifts, because she founded the Doc Dish, and which I would imagine is a publication, and she's currently writing a cookbook that focuses on a diverse approach to feeding babies based on her own experience as a parent during her residency. We're so glad to have you, Dr. Locke. This is your second tour with us, so thank God that you came back to us. Our facilitator is none other than your sister-in-law, Reverend Jeanette Locke, who is on the ministerial staff at Star of Hope, involved in a lot of things, one of which I know is her passion, and that is working with youth. She and her husband, Michael, are leaders in our youth ministries. And we're just glad to have both of you. And I am just going to quickly turn it over to the Locke sisters. But first, I want to reiterate that this is recorded, and we will be using this recording in various capacities in our church ministry. So thank you for agreeing to do that, and thank you for agreeing to minister to us tonight. So there you are, the Locke sisters.
All right, good evening, sis. All right, so because we have so many questions, we're going to try to go quickly, but with enough information, okay? All right. So the first question.
You in my closet. Let me just close this door so my kids don't interrupt. Welcome to my Zoom school office, aka the walk-in closet.
COVID.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So the first question, it says, can you discuss the process of gaining immunity after the first and second shot?
Okay. So the COVID-19 vaccine, or the two COVID-19 vaccines that have been approved thus far for emergency use, and meaning emergency use, it means that these have been studied to the best of our ability in science, but there is no data in terms of what this vaccine, might do 30 years from now, 40 years from now. The science is very sound, and so the chances that this will do something to you 10 years from now, 30 years from now, is very, very small. So I'll explain the science behind this vaccine. And then this is the very first, or these two are the very first mRNA vaccines. And an mRNA vaccine is based on this molecule called memory RNA. Memory RNA is what our body makes when we learn a new virus. So when we get exposed to a virus, our cells gobble up that virus, take it to our immune cells or our immune machinery, most of which are under your arms, in your neck, in your gut, in your groin. That's why when you get sick, those parts of the body ache and they get swollen. So your body starts to make memory RNA, which then presents the foreign material or the virus to your immune system and allows your immune system to rev itself up and to make lots and lots of cells to neutralize that virus. So some cells go and they surround the virus and gobble it up. Other cells go and present it to other cells, so those cells can come and neutralize the virus. So what the COVID-19 vaccine does is give your body a piece of mRNA or memory RNA that then goes to your immune cells and allows your immune system to learn that spike protein. And by learning it, meaning it takes it in, it gobbles it up, and then the immune system presents that spike protein on the outside of your immune cells, and it starts making that protein. And that protein that you see on the outside of the COVID virus, all those little, those little spikes coming out of that circle that you see when we talk about COVID-19, that's the spike protein. That's the first part of COVID that our bodies see and that we're exposed to. So your body starts making little pieces of that spike protein. And after your first shot, your immune system says, hey, there's a protein in our body that we don't recognize. This doesn't belong here. And so then your immune machinery turn on, they make immune cells to go and eat that spike protein up that your body has just made. After your second shot, your body gets exposed again to this spike protein. So it's thought that after you get your first COVID-19 vaccine of this mRNA type, you're about 70% protected from COVID, which isn't bad, which is part of why in medicine, there's been discussion of maybe we should just split all the doses, get to a 70% immunity in the population, and then that would at least start to bend the curve when it comes to COVID. However, it wasn't studied in that way. So if we were to say everyone's just going to get one dose, we don't really have any evidence as to how effective it would be. The science we have so far says about 70%. So after your first dose, you're about 70% protected. After your second dose with the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, you're considered anywhere from 90 to 95 or 96% protected, which is incredible. Now, when we say protected, we don't mean you will not get COVID. What we mean is you will not die of COVID. So when we say you're protected, even so, I'm vaccinated, my husband's vaccinated. It's not like it's a free pass just to go out in the world and do anything, because I could actually still pick COVID up at work. And I work with COVID patients every day. I'm intubating, I'm, in the face of COVID. So if I were to get COVID, the chances that I would die are very small, but the chances that I could make active virus and then pass the virus on to someone else exists. It has not been well studied how infectious you are if you've been vaccinated. It's still a question that we don't know the answer to. So that's what memory RNA is, and that's how this vaccine works. It's the very first of its kind. There's never been a memory RNA vaccine, but in theory, it opens the door to a much safer and much more efficient way to vaccinate people, because you're actually not exposing a person to an actual virus. All of the vaccines that we've had in the past are either live vaccine, which means they've taken a live virus and they've weakened it in some way. So there are some vaccines that, you shouldn't get if you're if you have cancer or if you're immunocompromised, right? These live vaccines. Or there's an attenuated version, which is, so the weakened version. And then there's killed virus, where they kill the virus and they give that to you. And so it's not infectious, but it shows your body the foreign, so that when your body sees that virus again, it can fight. And then the last kind of vaccine that exists is a vaccine that is basically just a couple of little pieces of the virus. So it would just, instead of giving you mRNA, it would give you just the spike protein to a virus, or it will give you just the, just the encapsulated part of the virus. Does that make sense? Sorry, kind of a long answer.
That was a really good answer, though. You answered a couple of questions with that one.
Okay.
That was very, very good. Okay. So the next one is it true that if you've had COVID, you may not need a second vaccine?
This is one that nobody really knows the answer to. So it used to be when the vaccine first came out, if you recently had a COVID-19 infection, they said you could not get the virus for 3 months. That's changed. So now, if you've recently had the virus, we're still actively vaccinating people. There are some people who have had their first shot, and then in between their first and second shot, they've gotten COVID and they still get their second shot. And the reason for this is that we don't know enough in terms of how protected someone is if they've had COVID once. So we have seen a few repeat infections and we don't fully understand why. So it may be that the virus is mutating. And so an individual was exposed to one strain, and then the next strain they were exposed to was different enough that it infected them again, and their body's immunity wasn't strong enough. We also have seen that after about 7 to 10 months, someone's immunity wanes, meaning right after they have COVID, we do antibody testing and it shows they have a strong antibody response. And then 10 months later, there's no antibody response. And so what's unique about this memory RNA vaccine is that it imprints the spike protein in our immune system. So if you had COVID and the antibody that beat COVID in your body was not to the spike protein, maybe it was to like the internal machinery of COVID. If you see COVID again and you don't have a strong immunity to that very first protein that your body's going to see when you get exposed to COVID again, you won't be able to start to fight it very quickly. And that's the kind of name of the game with all viruses. How fast can your body contain it? And so that's why HIV is so hard to fight. So when you get the vaccine, we make sure that you get the spike protein, the first thing that your body will see. So people who have had COVID should still get the vaccine.
Okay. That was a lot too. That was a lot of information. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We need to hear this because you're breaking it down for us to understand what's going on as best as you can, as best as you guys know. Okay. What if I got the first dose but missed my second dose? What should I do?
So if you got the first dose but couldn't get the second, you're still considered about 70% protected. So that's great. You should get it as quickly as possible. So most of the time, the Pfizer vaccine, it's recommended that you get about 3 weeks after your first. The Moderna vaccine, it's 4 weeks after your first dose. But if that extends to 5 or 6 weeks, is it going to make a huge difference? No. The important thing is showing your body this foreign thing and then showing it to your body again. So that's why there's 2 vaccines, and that's why there's 2 doses. And that's like why you need a tetanus booster shot, right? When you take your kids to the doctor when they're being vaccinated. So you heard of the booster shots. The booster shots are us, are the vaccine, the vaccine, the medical world, showing your body this foreign thing one more time so that it reminds the immune cells, hey, this thing is still out there. Don't put this antibody that you've made up on the shelf just yet. We want to keep this in circulation. We want to keep a really strong memory for this foreign thing in your body.
Okay, so you kind of answer one of the other questions so there is a difference between the actual first and second doses.
So the vaccine doses are the exact same thing.
Okay, so you're getting the same thing twice.
You're getting the same thing twice. And the reason why you want to get the same thing twice, so the first time you get memory RNA and your body starts making this spike protein. And then your body says, okay, this is foreign, we're going to fight it. So when my vaccine, I felt fine. And then when I got my second vaccine, I had a lot of symptoms. And the reason for that is kind of in the first shot, my body said, oh, this is a foreign thing. And it gobbled it all up. And that was that. The second shot, my body recognized it. So because my body recognized it, very quickly after that shot, the body kicks into high gear and starts making lots and lots and lots of immune cells. And that high gear is kind of like how you feel when you're fighting the flu. So your body is making lots and lots and lots of immune cells to fight that virus.
That was very informative. That was really good because it's breaking it down so that we understand, especially for those getting the second shot, that you might be preparing yourself to feel like you have the flu.
That's another question, right? Do you want me to answer that one now?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So just anecdotally, everyone that I've spoken with, their second shot, they had symptoms. My husband, who says, I'm built different and I'm built different and I'm going to be fine. He ended up with a fever of 103, sweating, muscle aches. So basically, because it's exposing your body to the same foreign thing a second time, if you have a strong immune system, usually what you'll experience, sometimes 6 to 12 hours after the shot, most people experience some swelling at the axilla, your armpit, basically, on the arm that you get the shot, because that's where you initially get exposed. So we inject it into your arm. The mRNA is going to your immune cells, the lymph nodes that live in your armpit or your axilla, and then they start churning out spike protein and antibodies and all this, everything to pretend like your body is actually fighting COVID, because that's what we're doing when we give you the vaccine, right? We want to pretend that your body is fighting COVID with a real molecule from COVID without giving you all of COVID. So usually people within 6 to 12 hours get some swelling under the armpit. Then most people will complain of fatigue. Fatigue is the overarching thing that I've heard from all of my colleagues and most people. The next thing is myalgias, or muscle aches and pains. My legs, my low back, I had kind of you feel overall achy. And then some people will get a true fever. So like my husband, he had a true fever. Nothing that Tylenol and Motrin can't fix, but important to remember to try to stay on top of taking Tylenol or Motrin, whichever one is your kind of go-to, because if you don't, I actually worked the next day after I got the vaccine. So when I first got the vaccine, I took my Motrin. I woke up the next day, I took my Motrin. I was feeling great. I was, I'm going to have some ginger, some turmeric. I'm going to do a lot of anti-inflammatory stuff and vitamin D. And then I went to work and forgot to take another dose of Motrin and Tylenol. And within probably 2 or 3 hours of that Motrin wearing off, I was just really uncomfortable. So if you stay on top of Tylenol and Motrin, you should be able to avoid most of the symptoms and just get away with kind of being a little bit fatigued. But don't be surprised if you feel those symptoms, and then don't be alarmed. Don't think that you're getting COVID, because there is actually no true COVID in the vaccine. It's only one little protein that is not really dangerous to your body.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have one that you touched on it a little bit, but if you could expand just a little bit, it says, will the vaccine make our chances better if we are exposed to one of the variants?
So it's you're getting this spike protein, and the variants of COVID are not it's not always the spike protein that's mutating. Sometimes it's the DNA that's inside of COVID that's mutating. So it has been studied, and so the UK variant, yes, 100% you're still protected. There is one variant in South Africa that there was a concern that maybe the spike protein had mutated a bit. So we don't have very, very good data on this South African strain. However, there is some evidence that shows exposure to recent coronaviruses is somewhat protective. So not COVID-19 per se, but other coronaviruses helps to protect you. So in theory, having the vaccine would also protect you against most of the variants, and at least partially to this South African variant that has been found. But there's not great, it's not really been studied in these, in the populations with all the variants at this point. So, we're hopeful in the medical world.
Okay.
But it's not a sure thing.
Right. Okay. So how long after chemotherapy and or radiation should one get the COVID vaccine?
You can get it right away. So after chemo or radiation, you can get it right away. Because this is not a live virus or an attenuated virus or kind of like a traditional vaccine, you could get it right away. Most chemo does put your immune system at a bit of a disadvantage though. So just, as a physician, I would say, if you get your chemo on a Monday, better to wait till Friday to get your vaccine, because a lot of chemotherapies make you what's called neutropenic, meaning your immune cell counts go very, very low. And so in wanting to induce an immune response in somebody, if your immune cells have been, kind of taken out by chemotherapy, chances that you'll mount a great response against this spike protein in the vaccine are less. So, I would first talk to your oncologist before you do anything. The oncologist should be able to give you some guidance. But anyone who is immunocompromised should definitely get the vaccine. It puts you at a huge advantage if you get exposed to COVID in terms of not dying. And that's the goal. We just don't want people to keep dying from this awful virus.
Yes. Okay. How can we tell if someone with a suppressed immune system has developed the antibodies necessary for protection against COVID? Is there any way to determine that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's actually a test that's available from a commercial company now that one of my colleagues actually bought this because she's an ER doctor too, and her sons were exposed to someone with COVID at school. So it's called, here, I'll put it in the chat for you. And it was initially that you had to have an NPI number or a physician's number or practitioner number to be able to get this. But they've since changed it to, and you can just kind of buy it and use it at home. Oh, let me find it. Okay. So it's called code1supply.com. And so code1supply.com does tests where you can prick your finger and put a little drop of blood, kind of like you would check your blood sugar if you're a diabetic. And then their one test, it costs about $20 per cartridge. So I think it's $20 for one cartridge, or like $25 for one cartridge, and like $250 if you buy 20 cartridges. And you can prick your finger and you can put your blood on this little spot, and it will say if you have IgG or IgM to COVID. So the IgG is a sign that you have a more early active infection. IgM is that you've kind of recovered and you have lasting antibodies. So you could certainly get one of those tests, And you know, for your own home use, you have to certify that you're not going to resell them. You have to, you know, not use them in clinical practice unless you're a practitioner. But you know, you could certainly, you know, get one of those tests and check and make sure that your body mounted a response. So my colleague, she and her husband are both ER doctors too, and they both took the test, and they, you know, they were like, yes, we're maybe this vaccine actually did work. So.
Wow. Okay. Now, what that would be like? Could anybody get that?
It looks like anybody can get it now. Yeah, it looks like anybody can buy this test. There's a bunch of like super expensive tests, but there's so it's called the Assure Tech Eco Test COVID-19 IgM and IgG test kit. And you can get it. You just have to certify that either you're a physician, practitioner, and provide an NPI number, or you have to say that you have to agree that you're not using it for commercial use.
Okay.
Or resale. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking off of that. So say you didn't know you had COVID, and you want to do this test just to see.
You could.
Okay, so that would work for that as well.
Yeah, you could.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So moving it along, this is a very this is the question that we were talking about. Okay, so can you discuss the potential immune disease side effects from using the R messenger with this vaccine? Like developing autoimmune diseases like diabetes, MS, lupus, etc.
Right. Okay. So this is a common question. And I think that, so this is something that even I was afraid of, right? Because whenever first of all, I have not always trusted the medical establishment. It's part of why I became a physician, because I don't trust doctors. So I was like, well, if I don't trust you, but I become you, then I'll be able to do research. Yes. So that's part of why I became a physician. So, you know, the autoimmune response that people who get COVID have is devastating. And we don't fully understand it. So medicine does not fully understand the autoimmune response. COVID causes kidney failure in some. It causes massive blood clots in others. So it, you know, and the immune cascade that happens that destroys the lungs is so profound and is still not really well understood by us in medicine. So I certainly understand the fear that I'm getting a vaccine. This is a new type of a vaccine. What is it going to do in my body that could potentially cause inflammation? And then autoimmune stuff too. So the mRNA is basically a little piece of mRNA is something that, you know, your body is used to mRNA. It's kind of like, you know, it's like water or food, right? We take foreign stuff into our bodies every single day, right? We eat a salad, you don't know, you know, there could be pesticides on that salad, there could be bugs in the salad. So our bodies are very well equipped to taking things in that are foreign, processing them, taking what we need, taking what's healthy, and throwing out the rest. And so even though this is a new type of technology, the foreign piece that the vaccine is presenting to our bodies is the piece that is the first recognized, but then is not super dangerous. It's just a spike protein. It's not the part of COVID that's causing this crazy inflammatory cascade that we don't understand. It's only the first part of COVID that allows COVID to kind of like unlock the key to our cells. So we're like, you know, while I do think, okay, this is a little scary. This is a new vaccine. How well has it been studied? I used to joke, you know, maybe I'm going to turn into a zombie. Maybe I'm going to be the Walking Dead. Maybe they're putting a chip in me. You know, yes, maybe all of these things. And, you know, as a physician, as a woman, as a person of color, I question everything. You know, is this going to be syphilis? Is this a smallpox blanket? And I still have that level of skepticism when it comes to the US medical establishment. That being said, I have also watched what this thing from nature has done to people. I have watched grandfather, grandmother, son, and daughter all die with no understanding of how that, you know, it's so hard to watch. And then I've watched people, you know, with symptoms for months and months and months because of this inflammatory cascade that we can't stop and we don't understand in medicine. So as afraid as I was that maybe I would turn into a zombie or maybe they're putting a chip in me, the risk of not getting the vaccine to me was too great than the risk of getting the vaccine. And so even though I was a little bit afraid and a little bit hesitant, we got to stop. We have to dig out of this. You know, it's heartbreaking to see, you know, husband, wife, children dying from this virus. And the vaccine has been very well tested and it has not caused that. And so to me, you know, it might not be perfect. You know, maybe, I don't know. I doubt that it's going to cause arthritis down the road in me. And the other thing that I am a big proponent of is eating a really great anti-inflammatory diet. So even if this mRNA vaccine is somehow promoting inflammation in my body in some way, I'm going to do everything I can to eat to make sure that my body is functioning at kind of, you know, as well as it can, right, so that I don't experience those side effects, so that my body would beat COVID plus, you know, any side effects that the vaccine would pose.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so in what, with everything that you know, are there any groups of people that should not get the vaccine?
So it is not yet approved in children. So they're only approved in kids over the age of 16. And I don't know when that's going to change. I think the Johnson & Johnson vaccine may be different because it's more of a traditional vaccine, but it's not approved in children yet. But having seen, you know, so many people with COVID, children have a very mild response to COVID. And so, you know, the fact that our kids can't get vaccinated right now, you know, for me, I was never worried if my kid gets COVID, what will happen to them? It's always been, if my kid gets COVID, what will happen to my husband, you know, or what will happen to, you know, grandma and grandpa. That was more my fear. So that's really the only group that it has not been approved in yet. And so, you know, I encourage everyone who has access to a vaccine to get one.
Okay. All right. If you received the flu shot in October, is it okay to get the COVID shot now? And what about the shingles shot?
Mm-hmm. So if you've received a vaccine within 30 days, they will make you delay your vaccine. So that actually almost happened to a colleague of mine. They called him and told him he needed to get his flu shot. They ended up giving him the COVID vaccine anyway because he was at like day 25 and he was fine. But you know, if your doctor offers you a shingles shot today, keep in mind when the COVID shot becomes available to you, you won't be able to get it if it's within 30 days. So just you know, it's perfectly safe. I think, you know, a lot of people in healthcare were vaccinated against the flu in October. Some even in December, because many people thought, oh, why do I need it this year? I'm wearing a mask all the time. You know, we're not going to be exposed to the flu. So, yeah, so that's the only caveat. You're certainly safe to get the COVID-19 vaccine, but if you've had one within 30 days, they'll ask you to delay your first shot.
So would that also be true for like the pneumonia vaccine?
Yes, they ask you if you've had any vaccine within the last 30 days.
Okay.
Yep, anything. Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of go into the differences in the different vaccines. What do you know or want to share with us in reference to like Johnson & Johnson?
Mm-hmm. So the Johnson & Johnson is a more traditional form of the vaccine. I haven't looked into it too much. It's not mRNA, it's not new technology. It's more in line with the traditional vaccines. So they've attenuated COVID, meaning they've weakened it or they've killed it. And that's how they're presenting it to your body. So it's a more traditional form of a vaccine. or they've removed certain genes from COVID and they've inserted it into another virus. That's a common way we make vaccines now. We'll take a couple of genes out of COVID. So they'll take the spike protein out of COVID and they'll put it into another virus that we know is like the common cold, that we know is not dangerous. And then they'll show it to your body. And so that's a more traditional type of vaccine.
Okay.
And those have been shown to be about 70% effective. And there's a lot of people then say, well, I don't want that shot. I don't want that shot. It's only 70% and 70% isn't good enough for me. If there's a 95% one, I want the 95% shot. And as a person, I would say the same thing. I want the 95% shot. Right. However, as a population, these mRNA vaccines have to be kept incredibly cold in these special freezers. If they're not, kept cold enough, they won't work, they won't be effective. So there are places in the US where we are not going to be able to get this mRNA vaccine to safely. Or those people are going to have to travel somewhere. And so when it comes to a vaccine and a pandemic, really all we need is about 50 to 70% efficacy. So that's all we get in a flu shot every year. In our flu shots, they're usually about, one year we had a really bad flu and it was because the flu shot was only like 40% effective in targeting the flu variants that we had. Even still, we still didn't see a pandemic of flu like they saw in the Spanish flu in, 1918, right? Or 1920. So 70% effectiveness in the whole population would be a miracle in terms of us controlling the pandemic. So while, and 70% efficacy in terms of preventing you from dying again is pretty good, right? So while it would, in a perfect world, everyone will get the 95% effective vaccine. It may not be realistic to do that for everyone. And there's no saying that if you get the 70% effective vaccine, you can't go back and get the 90% effective vaccine, a couple of weeks or months later. So, I would not be worried about which vaccine you're getting. And,
is that why it is one shot, because it doesn't have to be kept cold and so they can make more of those quicker and get them out to people quicker because it does not need to be refrigerated?
So it's one shot mainly because it's a little bit of a different technology. So it shows you foreign, whereas an mRNA vaccine teaches your body to make the foreign. And then after your body makes the foreign, then it goes after the foreign. So it's kind of like it skips that one step that an mRNA vaccine needs. So an mRNA vaccine uses your body's machinery to make the spike protein. And then after your body makes the spike protein, it says, wait a second, we don't want this around. And then it goes after the spike protein. It also goes after whatever is left over of that mRNA. And it leaves you with the memory cells, the IgM part of your immune response that your body will keep as you. Basically, it's like, imagine like your immune cells are these like Y-shaped things, right? And all of my Y-shaped immune cells look like my face, right? And some of them have glasses on, some of them like have a stapler on it. Some of them have like, a pen, right? Imagine those are like your different spike proteins, but all of my immune cells look like me. So that mRNA vaccine doesn't look like me. So my body has already eaten that up. The only thing that my body holds on to is the thing that I made that works in fighting that virus. So with mRNA, the technology is such at this point that you need that second shot because your first shot teaches your body how to make the spike protein and then go after it. But that's not strong enough to really get you enough of an immune response to hold onto that memory that looks like you. And the second shot ensures that you get those memory cells. Whereas the Johnson & Johnson one, the whole thing is foreign. The way it teaches your body to recognize it is by presenting completely foreign stuff. Your body gobbles it up. Your body makes the immune cells. And that's kind of the difference between a more traditional and an mRNA vaccine. I hope that they get to the point where mRNA vaccines, they'll be able to do one shot, but I'm not sure if the technology is there yet, because in theory, 2 shots with mRNA makes more sense.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that. All right. So let's see. So you touched pretty much on a lot of the things that were like conspiracy theory. So we're going to go to the children and the vaccine. So you said that children under 15 and under, they don't have a vaccine for it yet. So when vaccines are available to children, what factors, if any, should a parent consider before deciding to have a child be given the vaccine?
Sorry, hold on 1 second. I'm trying to do the chat too. Oh wait, say it one more time.
When the vaccines are available to children, what factors, if any, should a parent consider before deciding to have a child vaccinated?
So vaccines are, they're somewhat controversial, I think, in kids. There's lots of conspiracy theories out there. I think in the US, we don't have as much reverence for vaccines because we haven't seen these horrible, horrible viruses. So having seen the measles in someone that didn't get vaccinated, I get it. I get why we have the measles vaccine. I get why those MMR shots are so important for our babies. Nobody wants their babies to end up with the measles. So as soon as this is approved in kids, I would say, yes, definitely get your shots, get your vaccines, make sure that your kids get them. This virus has not proven to be super dangerous in children, which is such a blessing. If babies were coming in dying the way that adults are coming in dying, me and many of my colleagues are have struggled with the mass death that we're seeing this year. I can't imagine how much worse it would be if it were babies. So I encourage everyone to be vaccinated. The sooner that we get to a space of herd immunity with this virus, the sooner we can get back to some semblance of normal life.
Right. Okay, so you touched on everything else as far as the age groups, and at this point, you've already stated that we don't know when the vaccine will be ready and available for children. So
right, yeah. And I think that just from the medical establishment, hopefully, the important thing is getting the people who are dying vaccinated first. So, that's our, our elders, and that's our, younger people who have comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, all of these things that have proven to be very, huge risk factors in COVID-19.
So, and as we're talking about that, there was a question in reference to if one of the people in the household is high risk and the rest of them aren't. If they get the vaccine, would it be prudent for everyone to be vaccinated at the same time? Now, I know for Mike, my concern is Mike. I don't have any health issues or anything like that. So what do you say about that?
So it's funny that you say that. So when I was offered my vaccine, it was the very first week it was available. I'm an ER doctor, so as soon as my hospital had a batch, I was on like the list for day one, and I got it day one. But I remember going to get it and thinking to myself, man, I wish I could give this to my husband because he wasn't on the list yet to get it. And my main reason for that is because in my household, he's the only one with, a comorbidity, and he's older and he's male. So being male has shown to be another risk factor. The reality, it would be great if every single person in the house could get vaccinated on day one. But the reality of what we're dealing with is that we don't have enough vaccine. We've not been able to roll out a comprehensive strategy to get everyone vaccinated. The fact that it is so, up to the states, and that people now are crossing state lines because one state has a more lax policy is really a problem. So for me, the most important thing in a household would be to get the elders and the people with comorbidities vaccinated first. And so it's the people that are most at risk of dying, because lots of people get COVID. And while there are many, there's this long-term COVID that we've seen that is insidious and very uncomfortable. Presumably we can find a way to reverse that, to treat that. Death is irreversible. So getting the person that is highest at risk vaccinated is the most important, because getting the vaccine doesn't necessarily prevent you from getting COVID. It prevents you from dying of COVID. And so you might get COVID still, and everyone in the house might still get COVID, but the not dying is what we want to have happen.
Okay, so let me just grab one of these from the chat. You answered one of them, but there's another question. It says, what are your thoughts on children returning to school for in-person learning, especially schools that haven't taken care of the issues like proper heating, ventilation, and asbestos?
So my kids have not gone back to school yet, and it is driving me crazy. It is driving me insane. Any parent that is dealing with Zoom school, I feel for you. This struggle is real. So schools need to take care of the ventilation issues. That's a big lift for some schools. Hopefully there would be federal funding available, or the ability to do school outside. Obviously you can't do school outside when it's snowing. So I think that we should maintain a virtual option for every household that needs it. So if I, for instance, had, my mom and dad here, my dad is in his 80s. If they were here in my home and had not been vaccinated, I would say, no way, no how, my kids are not going to school. We have to protect, grandma and grandpa. But if, now in my household, it's just me and my husband, we're both vaccinated, I want my kids back in school as quickly as possible. And that's because, there are these other kind of collateral damage things that we're seeing in kids. And we're seeing it more in our, in communities of color. We're seeing it more in communities that are at an economic disadvantage. And that to me is unacceptable. We're taking a very unlevel playing field in America, and we're making it even more unlevel with what's happening and our children not being in school. So to me, it's a travesty that bars are open and schools are not, that wineries can open and schools cannot, that restaurants can open and schools cannot. I mean, that just really to me shows the backwards way that this has been handled. So I'm all for kids getting back to school, because kids don't get that sick. But I think it is very personal for every household, and what extended family members are there, and the risk of, if the child gets COVID, what is the risk of the people at home? And so if everyone at home can get vaccinated, then great. If not, then, it's a house by house, case by case kind of a dilemma.
Right. Okay. So we have a few more questions if we can just, try to get through. I know we're getting really close to being done. Okay. Here's one. Why is COVID-19 more deadly for people with cancer?
And I'm happy if anybody has any questions at the end, like if you just want to raise your hand and ask any questions that have come up during this time period. I don't know if you still want to keep recording, Mrs. Barnes, but I'm happy to stay a little extra and answer questions. So why is this so deadly in people with cancer? Okay. So COVID is deadly in people who for some reason aren't able to mount a good immune response against it. So kids mount great immune responses because kids are constantly getting sick, right? Kids are always like, now you got a cold, now you got the flu, now you got an ear infection, now you got, you know, kids are always getting sick. So their immune systems are very well versed at seeing something quickly and making immune cells. Cancer patients or anybody who is immunocompromised is a little bit, you know, they're not at such a great advantage. Now, there's this weird thing that happens in COVID though, where you get COVID and some people just get better. Some people don't ever notice they had it. They have a headache, they have a little bit of fatigue, and then they get better. And then there's this other population of people where they get COVID, they get horrible, horrible symptoms, and then they get better. Then there's this other group that get COVID, are sick for about a week or 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, it's like they fall off a cliff. And the interesting thing that we see in these people that have been sick for 2 weeks and then they fall off a cliff, they're actually not infectious for COVID anymore. So the other day I saw a guy in the ER who had been sick for 16 days, right? And your quarantine period is 14, sometimes now 10 days, depending on what literature you're looking at. So this guy had been sick for 16 days. And just now, after 16 days, he was getting hypoxic, meaning, you know, his oxygen level was not high enough. His chest x-ray looked like his lungs had just been obliterated. And so when we had this, so then we try to figure out, okay, do we have to isolate him in an isolation room or do we not isolate him? And so now we have a test, and the test that we do kind of counts how long it takes to produce a positive test on a PCR. So it counts how many cycles. And so if it takes more than 30 cycles, you're considered no longer infectious. So for this guy, his cycles was greater than 30. So even though he's in the hospital dying of whatever this thing is, he's no longer infectious for COVID. So what it looks like is happening is COVID is somehow getting into the lungs, getting into the kidneys, getting into the blood system and creating blood clots and all of these other things. And then even though, and it's turning something on in our immune system to really like wreak havoc. And so that's where the subsequent lung damage and blood clots and all of these kind of horrible things that we are seeing people die of, even though they're no longer infectious to COVID. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of a fascinating thing to look at.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, so how long do I have to wait after I have my mammogram? Oh, okay, so yes, so this is a great question. It is, the literature says 4 to 6 weeks. And the reason for that is because when you have a mammogram, so like I talked about, I remember my lymph nodes swelled so much. And so when you have a mammogram, they look at the lymph nodes, and the lymph nodes, you know, if you happen to have a lump, they'll do lymph node testing. And if your lymph nodes have turned on because of the COVID vaccine, you could get a false positive on a mammogram. So the literature is saying 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, and I would probably wait the full 6 weeks, just, you know, just because, yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay. I know someone who contracted the virus twice in a short period of time. In between the incidences, they tested negative for 2 months. How is that possible? Did the person not develop antibodies after the first encounter?
So it's possible that they didn't develop antibodies. The other possibility is that they developed antibodies to a part of COVID that, you know, wasn't the spike protein. The other possibility is that they had the unfortunate circumstance of getting exposed to one COVID strain, and then the second infection was a variant. So, but I've seen that. The one person I saw it in was an immunocompromised person. So it was a kidney transplant, a young lady who had a kidney transplant, and she had been infected. She had COVID. She had very mild symptoms, and then her mother got COVID, and she actually got COVID again. Again, she had very mild symptoms, but she was considered a reinfection. So.
Wow, it's just so unpredictable. It's just so unpredictable. Okay, could you clarify your thoughts about wearing double masks?
Oh yes, double mask. Hang on. Oh, this is Todd calling. Sorry, I'm sorry. So okay, double masks. I'm all for double masking. you know, obviously an N95 mask is going to be your best protection, and the N95 masks and the KN95 masks are readily available. I trust that PPE. I have been up in the face of COVID hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times at this point with an N95 mask and face, eye protection, and I have not gotten COVID. Our whole family made it to the vaccine without getting COVID. We actually had to travel back to Philly during the holidays for some, unfortunate family stuff. And I was sure someone was going to come back with COVID. And I put everybody in an N95 mask that I had from the hospital and a shield. And amazingly, everyone came back without COVID. So double masking is better than single masking. A surgical mask plus a cloth mask on top of that, you come close to the N95 protection. If you can get a KN95 mask or an N95 mask from Amazon, those are great too. And they seem to be more readily available now. So masks are very important. They work, they 100% work as long as you're good about your hand washing and your PPE. When they always ask you questions, have you been in contact with anyone who's been exposed to COVID-19? And I'm always saying to myself, well, I wasn't really exposed because I had the PPE on, but technically, yes, I was right up in the face of somebody who had COVID yesterday, putting a breathing tube in them. So, myself and I think all my colleagues in the ER, none of our physicians have gotten COVID. And in Salinas, we are like the salad bowl of America. So if you look on your lettuce, 9 times out of 10, it's come from Salinas. We have a huge population of migrant workers. And so our community has been just decimated by COVID. But our physicians have all remained healthy. So PPE works. Double masking is good.
Yeah. Okay. Could you clarify the re-quarantining restrictions after you're fully vaccinated?
Oh yeah. So they say that we don't have to quarantine anymore. Yeah, that just changed. That actually just changed, I think, last week. So if you're vaccinated, if you're vaccinated, it used to be, if you travel or you do anything or you have an exposure, that you have to quarantine for 10 days, 10, 14, depending on, where you're at. But now they say that if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine anymore.
Wow. News to me. Okay.
Yeah.
If I contract the virus variant after I am fully vaccinated, will the symptoms and outcome of the course of the virus be better?
So presumably, yes. The textbook, well-documented answer is we don't really know. We don't have any population that this has been studied in well enough to see, how well, as far as I know, there's not like, a bunch of vaccination happening in South Africa to see if this vaccine is effective there. However, I suspect the science is probably going on now, but nothing has come out to really, to tell us either way. However, the spike protein can only mutate so much. And so your body benefits from seeing something that is similar, because if your body has something similar, if you imagine kind of like a factory, right? Your immune system is like a factory making immune cells that fight foreign when they see it. So if you have something similar on the shelf, you kind of have a prototype for your body to react faster. So presumably you would have a shorter and better course with one of the variants if you've been vaccinated. Now, how, is it going to be 95% effective in preventing you from dying? Hopefully, but unfortunately, we just don't know yet.
Right. So after everyone is vaccinated or after you're fully vaccinated, like if Mike was to get his vaccine and everything, could he be around his grandkids, hug them, love them, and all that good stuff? Or
so you'll get 3 different answers if you ask 3 different doctors. So I've watched probably 3 or 4 different physicians on TV all say something different. And I think that, people are very afraid to commit to anything because we just don't have any good data, really. However, in my, very humble opinion, once my kids are able to see my stepdad again, once my kids are able to see my mom again, yes, if they're fully vaccinated, I'm fine with, I'm fine with them hugging each other. I'm fine with them interacting without a mask on. Provided that my kids aren't sick. Now, if my kids are sick with fever or anything like that, I'm gonna put a mask on them and I'm gonna have, precautions in place again. But once that at-risk person is vaccinated, they're 95%, 95% protected, against having really serious COVID. So, I would be fine with it. And I think that a lot of people in medicine are also saying the same. Okay. Some people are saying still with a mask because, a child could be an asymptomatic carrier, and then you want to try to protect their respiratory droplets from that more at-risk person. But again, the vaccine is so very effective that I would be okay with it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, what do you think that life will look like after?
Oh, this is like the $1 million question. Oh gosh, what is life gonna look like?
Do you feel that it would ever go back to like normal?
So I think that, yes, I do think that once we have a effective vaccine and we have most at-risk people vaccinated, I think life will go back to somewhat normal. I don't know if I'm ever going to travel on an airplane though without a mask, because for the first time in my life, I traveled over the holidays back to Philly and I did not get a cold. And I always get a cold when I travel. I always feel run down. I always get a cold. And I don't wear a mask. This was the first time I ever got on an airplane with an N95 mask and a shield. And so, I don't think, and I remember years and years ago when SARS-1 happened and seeing so many Asian people in the airport with masks on and thinking like, man, that's a little bit extra, isn't it? But they saw SARS-CoV-1, like they saw this before, and it just didn't get out of control the way that SARS-2, this COVID-19 virus has gotten. So, I think that much like the Asian population that wears the masks in the airport, I will be a masker in the airports all the time from now on, because, I happen to, I get sick when I travel. I think that work from home is going to be kind of revolutionized now as well. I think that lots of businesses are going to realize that they don't need to pay for this, super expensive office building. Obviously, the technology that we've gotten from this is going to change. So I think that I don't think that life will ever go back to the way it was, but life never goes back to the way it was, right? Like, Blockbuster Video went out of business and now we all have Netflix. So, I think life will be forever changed from this, but I do think that we'll be able to have a party again one day and, hug each other again and have that human touch again once we're able to neutralize the fact that people are just dying of this.
So you pretty much answered the next question, which is, should we feel comfortable in large gatherings?
I think now, absolutely not. Now definitely not. But once we get to the point where 70% of the population is immunized, then yes, certainly. Once 70 to 80% of the population is immunized, the prevalence of the virus will go down. And so, we'll be able to be in gatherings again. But right now, right now I would not gather in a large group of people.
Okay. So I have one final question and then we can open it to either the chat or if anyone wants to jump in and ask a question, but this one I missed in the beginning. And it is, what if you take the first vaccine and it's a Pfizer and then the second one is a Moderna? Like, is there a difference? Is there a problem with that? Is that a possibility or?
Wow, I haven't heard that one. Usually when you get your first vaccine, they make sure that there's a dose for you for the second. So, they, whoever is administering your vaccine should be keeping track of that, because when you get a first, they make sure that they have a second either on order or in the fridge for you, or freezer for you. So, that's a good question. I don't think anyone has studied that, because all of the studies obviously were either the Pfizer vaccine being studied or the Moderna vaccine being studied. And there was no like Pfizer and Moderna are, their competitors, and they were not intermingling their, their cohorts. I have seen one person who got, and I just learned about this the other day on Clubhouse. There was a person who was a test subject in the Pfizer vaccine, and he got the Pfizer vaccine. And then he was eligible to get vaccinated again, because I guess he was in healthcare. And then he got the Moderna vaccine, and he said the symptoms were the same both times, like the same kind of immune response. So, so in theory, you could get both. However, I don't think that the vaccines are identical. So the mRNA spike protein in the Pfizer vaccine is probably not the exact same mRNA in the Moderna vaccine. So you wouldn't really accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with getting one and then the other. It would be like you only had one of each. So yeah.
Okay. All right, so we can open it now to the chat if anyone has any further questions, or if you want to just ask. The floor is now open. You have given us so much to think about and a lot of information that was so helpful and so wonderful. I feel like I actually know a little bit more and a little bit more confident in what we have heard tonight. So we thank you. I appreciate it greatly. We appreciate your time. I know that you have a lot going on, and the babies are probably dying to get in there with you. And Todd is probably like, where's dinner? So
oh no, he's on his way home from work right now. That's why he was calling.
Okay, so thank you. Well, I'll turn it over to Mother Barnes.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you both. I just reiterate what Jeanette said. You've given us, Dr. Locke, just a wealth of information and really helped our understanding, so that the steps that we take going forward, we'll do it with more information and confidence. So thank you for your sacrifice in helping us. Thank you, Reverend Jeanette, for being such a good facilitator and helping along in this process. So this has been a night that has been rich in information. I think we all feel better informed. And also, it's recorded. We know that Trustee Brian Williams is going to have this available at some point on our website, and we can pick it up on YouTube, so that we can watch it over and over again and understand more and more each time. So thank you. To let you know that our next Hope Talks will be on March 10th, the second Wednesday in the month, and we will be announcing more about that going forward. So thank you again to the Locke ladies, and we appreciate it. Yes, we do. We appreciate it. Reverend Jeanette, we're going to ask you to pray us out, and then we will adjourn for the evening and gear up for the next one.
Amen. Okay. All right, Heavenly Father God, we just thank you for this wealth of information, Lord. We thank you for the vessel that you used this evening. We are so grateful, God, that she was able to give us of her time, Lord, and just to serve you in this capacity. Father, we pray over her and her family, Lord. We pray that you will cover and keep them, Lord. We know that they're on the front lines and they are just out there dealing face to face with COVID.